I'm Sarah Thompson, 34 years old, and last month I discovered lubricant and pills hidden in my husband's car. After 12 years of marriage to James, I thought I knew everything about him. When I found those items tucked away in his glove compartment, my world shattered. But instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to be strategic. What happened next in that restaurant changed everything forever. Before I tell you how I caught my husband and his mistress red-handed, take a second to like and subscribe. If you've ever had that gut feeling something was wrong in your relationship, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. James and I met during our sophomore year at the University of Michigan. I was studying marketing and he was pursuing finance. We literally bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop. His coffee spilled all over my white blouse, and instead of being angry, I found myself laughing at his mortified expression. He insisted on buying me a new shirt and another coffee. That coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into 12 years together. Our wedding was everything I had dreamed of. We got married at a beautiful vineyard just outside Ann Arbor, surrounded by 150 of our closest friends and family. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, James with his ambitious drive and charming smile, and me with my creative energy and organized nature. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. After graduation, James received an offer from a prestigious bank in Chicago. I was thrilled for him, even though it meant leaving my marketing job in Michigan. We packed up our small apartment and moved to the Windy City, ready for our next adventure together. I found a position at a marketing agency within a few months and soon built my own successful career as a consultant. We decided early on to delay having children. We wanted to establish our careers. First, build a solid financial foundation and enjoy our freedom while we were young. We traveled extensively, renovated our condo in Lincoln Park, and built what I thought was a strong marriage based on mutual respect and shared goals. The first sign that something wasn't right appeared about 6 months ago. James started working later than usual, often coming home after I was already in bed. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague and dismissive. He claimed it was just pressure at work, a big client, or an important project deadline. I wanted to believe him. Then came the changes in his behavior at home. The James who used to hold my hand during movies or surprise me with flowers for no reason disappeared. He became distant, constantly checking his phone and taking calls in another room. If I walked in while he was texting, he would quickly turn the screen away or put the phone down. I started feeling like I was living with a stranger. I noticed unexplained charges on our credit card statements, dinners at restaurants I had never been to, gifts from jewelry stores, and hotel charges for nights when he claimed to be working late. When I casually mentioned these, he had ready explanations: client dinners, a gift for his mother, a conference room booked for a meeting when their office was being renovated. James also started paying more attention to his appearance. He bought new clothes, started going to the gym more regularly, and even changed his cologne. After years of using the same scent, he suddenly switched to something more expensive and distinctive. I told myself this was a good thing, that maybe he was taking care of himself better. I ignored the voice in my head that warned me something else might be happening. Despite these warning signs, I tried to be understanding. Banking is a stressful industry, and James was working toward a promotion. I made excuses for his behavior and focused on being supportive. I planned special date nights, cooking his favorite meals and trying to reconnect. More often than not, he would cancel at the last minute due to work emergencies. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. My car was in the shop for routine maintenance, so I borrowed James's car to run some errands. While driving, I realized my phone battery was nearly dead. Knowing James always kept a charger in his glove compartment, I pulled over and opened it to search for one. That's when I saw it. Tucked beneath some papers was a small black bag. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside were 3 items: a small bottle of lubricant condoms and a bottle of pills that promised to enhance performance. Items he certainly wasn't using with me, as our intimate life had become nearly non-existent in recent months. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold the bag. Nausea swept through me in waves, and for a moment I thought I might actually be sick right there in the car. This wasn't ambiguous. This wasn't something I could rationalize away. This was evidence that my husband was sleeping with someone else. After taking several deep breaths to calm myself, I took photos of everything with my phone. I carefully returned the items exactly as I had found them, memorizing their precise position. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed more information. I needed to be certain. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced with questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Was it just sex, or was there an emotional connection too? Did everyone know except me? Was I the fool who couldn't see what was happening right in front of her? That night when James came home, I pretended everything was normal. I smiled, asked about his day, and acted as if my world hadn't just imploded. As he talked about work stress and office politics, I studied his face, looking for signs of deception in the features I had once known better than my own. He had no idea that I knew his secret, and I intended to keep it that way until I had all the answers I needed. The morning after finding the evidence, I knew I needed a plan. Confronting James immediately would only lead to denials and carefully constructed lies. He would be prepared for my accusations. No, I needed irrefutable proof and the element of surprise. So I became a detective in my own marriage. I started keeping a detailed log of James's activities. When he left for work, when he came home, the excuses he gave for being late, and any inconsistencies in his stories. I noted times when he claimed to be with certain colleagues or at specific client meetings. This information would later prove invaluable in catching him in lies. One evening, I prepared James's favorite dinner, complete with an expensive bottle of wine. While he was taking a shower beforehand, I installed a GPS tracking app on his phone. It was something I never thought I would do, violating someone's privacy like that. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The app would show me his location throughout the day, and he would never know it was there. Next, I checked our phone records. For months, I had ignored them, trusting my husband implicitly. Now I scoured them for patterns. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There was one number that appeared repeatedly at all hours of the day and night. Texts and calls to this number spiked on the days when James worked particularly late. I ran the number through a reverse lookup service online and got a name, Jennifer Williams. A quick search on social media filled in more details. Jennifer was in her early 30s, blonde, strikingly beautiful, and recently hired as the vice president of operations at James's bank. Her profile showed a woman who enjoyed luxury travel, fine dining, and expensive clothes. It also showed she was married to Michael Williams, a prominent cardiovascular surgeon at Chicago Memorial Hospital. I spent hours scrolling through her social media accounts, learning everything I could about the woman who was sleeping with my husband. She had attended Northwestern University, lived in a luxury high-rise downtown, and had been married for just 3 years. She frequently posted about charity galas and industry events, often with Michael by her side. But I also noticed there were many events where she appeared alone, always perfectly styled, and smiling for the camera. My research on Michael revealed he frequently traveled for medical conferences and speaking engagements. He was well respected in his field, published in major medical journals, and seemingly devoted to his career. I wondered if he knew about his wife's extracurricular activities, or if he was in the dark like I had been. Armed with Jennifer's name and the GPS tracker, I took my investigation to the next level. The following Thursday, James told me he had an important client dinner downtown. The GPS showed him heading to the Langham Hotel instead. I decided to follow him, parking my car where I could see the entrance. Sure enough, at 7:30, James walked into the hotel, looking nervous but excited. 15 minutes later, Jennifer arrived wearing a fitted dress and carrying a small overnight bag. They didn't meet in the lobby. Instead, James waited several minutes before following her inside. I wanted to storm in and confront them, but I forced myself to remain calm. I took photos of them both entering the hotel and waited. 2 hours later, they emerged separately, James leaving first and Jennifer following 10 minutes later. I managed to position myself close enough to overhear part of their goodbye conversation. "Tuesday works better for me next week," Jennifer said quietly. "Michael has a conference in Boston, so I don't have to make excuses." "Perfect," James replied, squeezing her hand. "Same time, same place. I'll tell Sarah I have that budget meeting that always runs late." My heart sank hearing him say my name, casually planning how to deceive me. They kissed quickly before separating, both checking to make sure no one was watching. They didn't notice me sitting in my car across the street, witnessing everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued tracking their pattern. They met regularly on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always at hotels, always when Jennifer's husband was busy or out of town. I gathered evidence methodically: photos, location data, hotel receipts. James carelessly left in his jacket pockets, screenshots of text messages I glimpsed on his phone. During this time, my emotions were all over the place. Some nights I would lie awake beside James, filled with rage, wondering how he could sleep so peacefully after betraying me. Other nights I would cry silently in the bathroom, mourning the death of what I thought was a happy marriage. There were moments when I considered simply filing for divorce and walking away, but something in me wanted more than that. I wanted accountability. I wanted them both to face consequences for their actions. My best friend Taylor was the only person I confided in. She had known both James and me since college, and was just as shocked by his behavior. She helped me gather information and provided the emotional support I desperately needed. "You need to think about what you want the outcome to be," Taylor advised one afternoon over coffee. "Do you want to try to save the marriage, or is this the end?" I didn't hesitate with my answer. "It's over. I could never trust him again. But I won't let him control the narrative. I won't be painted as the oblivious, pitiful wife. When this marriage ends, it will be on my terms." Taylor nodded, understanding completely. "Then you need to be strategic about how and when you confront him, and who's present when you do." That conversation was the genesis of what would become my master plan. Not just a confrontation, but a public reckoning that would leave no room for lies or manipulation. A trap so perfect that James and Jennifer wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. With evidence in hand and determination in my heart, I began developing a plan that would expose James and Jennifer in a way they couldn't deny or escape. This wasn't about revenge so much as justice and closure. I wanted the truth to be witnessed not just by me, but by others who mattered. The venue for my trap needed to be perfect. After careful consideration, I chose Lago, an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago. It was popular among banking executives and medical professionals, meaning there was always a chance of running into colleagues. More importantly, it was one of James and my favorite special occasion restaurants. The manager, Antonio, had known us for years, which would prove useful. Timing was equally critical. Using the calendar on James's laptop, which he sometimes left open at home, I discovered Michael Williams was scheduled to be in Chicago the following Friday night between conferences in New York and San Francisco. This would be my window of opportunity. My plan required careful manipulation of communication. First, I created a new email address that appeared to belong to James. The address was nearly identical to his actual work email, with just one character different, something that could easily be overlooked. From this account, I crafted a romantic email to Jennifer. "Jen, I miss you already. Can't stop thinking about last night. Let's break our routine and meet somewhere special tomorrow. Lago at 7 p.m. I've made reservations. Wear that red dress I love. James." For Michael, I took a different approach. I sent an anonymous email from a generic account. "Dr. Williams, I work with your wife and feel you should know about her relationship with James Thompson. If you want proof, come to Lago Restaurant tomorrow at 7:15 p.m. Look for the woman in red sitting with a man in a navy suit. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you deserve the truth." The reservations were crucial to my plan. I called Antonio directly, explaining that I needed 3 tables for Friday night, one for James and Jennifer, one for Michael when he arrived, and one for myself, where I could observe everything without being immediately noticed. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" Antonio asked, concern evident in his voice. We had become friends over the years, and he could tell something serious was happening. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, my voice steady. "James has been having an affair for months. I have proof. I just need everyone to see the truth at once." Antonio agreed to help, promising to arrange the tables exactly as needed and to be present himself that night. His support meant more than he could know. I didn't stop there. I ensured that several mutual friends would be dining at Lago that night as well. Taylor and her husband made reservations for 7:30. I also reached out to a couple from James's bank, who I knew socially, suggesting Lago for dinner without explaining why. The more witnesses, the better. My brother David, an attorney specializing in family law, was brought into my confidence. He helped me understand what evidence would be most useful for divorce proceedings and advised me on legal boundaries I shouldn't cross. He also agreed to be on standby Friday night in case things got complicated. "Just remember, Sarah," he cautioned. "The goal is exposure, not escalation. Stay calm and collected, no matter what happens." As Friday approached, I focused on preparing myself emotionally and physically for the confrontation. I selected my outfit carefully, a sleek black dress that conveyed confidence and composure, paired with the diamond earrings James had given me for our 10th anniversary. There was a certain poetry in wearing his gift to witness his betrayal. I organized all my evidence into a small folder, photos of James and Jennifer, entering hotels, screenshots of text messages, credit card statements showing expenditures on gifts and hotel rooms, and the photos of the items I'd found in his car. I made copies of everything, one set for me and another for Michael should he want it. I also purchased a small, discreet recording device. Illinois is a two-party consent state for recordings, so I couldn't use it as legal evidence, but I wanted to capture the confrontation for my own closure. Sometimes memory distorts reality, and I wanted to remember exactly how things unfolded. The night before the trap, I rehearsed what I would say over and over again. I practiced maintaining my composure, speaking clearly and factually without emotional outbursts. The power in this situation would come not from screaming or causing a scene, but from calmly presenting irrefutable truth. That night, as James slept beside me, oblivious to what awaited him, I felt strangely serene. For weeks, I had carried the burden of his deception alone, my mind constantly swirling with questions and pain. Now, on the precipice of exposure, I felt lighter. Whatever happened tomorrow, the lies would end. I would reclaim my dignity and my future. Morning came, and James left for work as usual, kissing my cheek absently. He mentioned the work event he had that evening, saying he'd probably be home late. I wished him a good day, smiling as if nothing was wrong. It would be the last normal morning of our marriage, though only I knew it. As I prepared for the evening ahead, I felt a strange mix of sadness and strength. The marriage I thought I had was already gone. Tonight wasn't destroying anything that hadn't already been destroyed by James's choices. Tonight was simply bringing those choices to light. Friday evening arrived with a sense of inevitability. I spent extra time getting ready, applying my makeup with precision, and styling my hair in loose waves that framed my face. As I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes held a determination I hadn't seen in years. This woman wasn't a victim. She was a force to be reckoned with. I arrived at Lago 30 minutes early, slipping in through the side entrance where Antonio was waiting for me. He guided me to my table, positioned behind a decorative screen, where I could see the main dining area, but wouldn't be immediately visible to anyone entering. "Everything is set exactly as you requested," Antonio said quietly, pouring me a glass of water. "James's reservation is for table 12 by the window. I've put Dr. Williams at table 14 when he arrives with a clear view of them. Your friends Taylor and Robert will be at table 15. I thanked him, my heart pounding despite my outward calm. Antonio squeezed my shoulder supportively before returning to his post at the front of the restaurant. All I could do now was wait. At precisely 6:55, Jennifer Williams walked through the door. She was wearing the red dress as suggested in the email, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked nervous but excited, checking her reflection in her compact mirror before being escorted to the reserved table. The hostess informed her that Mr. Thompson would be joining her shortly, and she ordered a glass of white wine while she waited. From my hidden vantage point, I studied the woman who had been sleeping with my husband. She was undeniably beautiful, constantly checking the door with anticipation. I wondered what James had told her about me, what lies he had spun to justify his betrayal. At 7:10, the door opened again and James walked in. He was wearing his navy suit as expected, but his expression was one of confusion when he saw Jennifer already seated at the table. This hadn't been his plan. He approached slowly, glancing around as if checking who might see them together. "Jennifer, what are you doing here?" I could just make out his words from my position. Jennifer's confusion mirrored his own. "What do you mean you emailed me to meet you here? You said to wear the red dress." James shook his head slightly, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I didn't send any email. We agreed not to meet in public places, especially not somewhere like Lago where people know me and Sarah." Before Jennifer could respond, the hostess approached James. "Mr. Thompson, your table is ready. I see you found Mrs. Williams already." With no graceful way to exit the situation, James reluctantly sat down across from Jennifer. They leaned in, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Jennifer pulled out her phone, presumably to show him the email. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew indicated his stress. At 7:15, right on schedule, Michael Williams entered the restaurant. He was tall and distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and an air of confidence that came from years of professional success. Antonio greeted him personally and guided him to his table, positioned with a perfect view of James and Jennifer. I watched as Michael spotted his wife with James. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something harder to define. He didn't approach immediately, instead, ordering a scotch and watching them from a distance. James and Jennifer were too engrossed in their whispered argument to notice his presence. The time had come. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and took a deep breath. Taylor and her husband had arrived during this exchange and were now seated nearby. They gave me subtle nods of encouragement as I passed their table. I approached James and Jennifer with measured steps, my heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. James saw me first. The color drained from his face so completely I thought he might faint. Jennifer followed his gaze, her eyes widening as she realized who I was. "Good evening," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "James, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" James's mouth opened and closed without producing sounds. Jennifer clutched her wine glass like a lifeline. "No, then I'll introduce myself. I'm Sarah Thompson, James's wife. And you must be Jennifer Williams. We've never formally met, but I feel like I know you quite well at this point." I placed my folder on the table and sat down in the empty chair between them. James finally found his voice, though it came out strained and higher than normal. "Sarah, what are you doing here? I told you I had a work event tonight." "Yes, you did, just like you told me you had client dinners on all those Tuesday and Thursday nights when you were actually at the Langham Hotel with Jennifer." I turned to her. "That is correct, isn't it, Jennifer? The Langham is your regular meeting spot, though sometimes you mix it up with the W downtown when they have those special weekend rates." Jennifer's face flushed crimson. "I don't know what you're talking about. James and I work together. This is a business dinner." I smiled calmly, opening my folder. "Business, I see. Is that why you brought an overnight bag to your last 3 meetings for business?" I laid out the first photo showing Jennifer entering the hotel with her small bag. James reached for it, but I pulled it back. "Please don't touch. I have copies, but these are my originals." By now, the tables around us had gone quiet. People were trying not to stare while clearly listening to every word. I continued, my voice clear enough to carry to nearby tables. "James, do you remember telling me you were working late on April 12th? That was the night you used our joint credit card to pay for a room at the W. I have the statement here." I slid another document forward. James's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "Sarah, stop this. We can talk at home. This is not the place." "Actually, this is exactly the right place," I replied, my voice unwavering. "You chose to conduct your affair in public places. You just didn't expect to be caught in one." I turned slightly, making eye contact with Michael, who was now standing. His presence finally registered with Jennifer, whose face went from crimson to ghostly pale in seconds. "Michael," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing here?" Michael approached our table slowly, his expression controlled but his eyes blazing with anger. "I received an interesting email today, Jennifer. Apparently, your relationship with Mr. Thompson extends beyond professional boundaries." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had paused, everyone watching the drama unfold. James made a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Dr. Williams, this is all a misunderstanding. Your wife and I were simply discussing a bank matter that couldn't wait until Monday." "Is that why you reserved a romantic table by the window?" Michael asked coldly. "For banking discussions." Before James could respond, I placed another piece of evidence on the table, photos of the lubricant and pills from James's car. "And I suppose these items I found in your glove compartment were also for banking discussions," I said, my voice finally betraying a hint of emotion. "The same glove compartment where you keep your wedding photo, as if it means something to you." Jennifer began to cry silently, mascara tracking down her cheeks. James looked trapped, his eyes darting between me, Jennifer, Michael, and the growing audience of restaurant patrons. "How long?" Michael asked Jennifer, his professional composure cracking slightly. When she didn't answer, I did. 4 months based on my investigation. Though it could be longer, that's just when the hotel visits began. Michael nodded slowly, absorbing this information with remarkable control. He turned to James. "You realize she's your subordinate at the bank. I believe that violates several company policies." James's face showed real fear now. The professional consequences were finally registering alongside the personal ones. "I have copies of everything," I said, addressing Michael directly for the first time. "Photos, receipts, text messages, location data. If you want them for your own closure or legal proceedings, they're yours." Michael looked at me with something like respect. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I believe I would appreciate that." I stood up, gathering my folder. My part was done. The truth was exposed, witnessed by everyone in the restaurant, including several of James's colleagues, who I now noticed at a corner table watching in shocked silence. "I'll leave you all to discuss this further," I said. "James, don't bother coming home tonight. The locks have been changed and divorce papers will be delivered to your office on Monday. You can contact me through my attorney." With that, I walked away, head held high. As I passed Taylor's table, she squeezed my hand in silent support. The restaurant remained unusually quiet, the only sounds being Jennifer's soft sobs and the muted conversation as James tried desperately to explain himself to Michael. I nodded to Antonio on my way out, thanking him silently for his help. Outside in the cool evening air, I finally allowed myself to exhale fully for what felt like the first time in months. It was done. The truth was out. And somehow I felt lighter than I had in years. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of emotions and consequences. As I left the restaurant that night, my phone began buzzing incessantly with messages and calls from James. I silenced it without looking at a single one and drove to the hotel where I had already checked in earlier that day, anticipating I wouldn't want to be home afterward. In the privacy of my hotel room, the composed facade I had maintained throughout the confrontation finally cracked. I sank onto the bed and sobbed, releasing months of pent-up pain, betrayal, and anger. These weren't just tears of sadness, but also relief. The weight of suspicion and investigation had been exhausting, and despite the pain, there was freedom in finally knowing the complete truth and having others witness it too. Around midnight, there was a knock at my door. It was Taylor carrying a bottle of wine, chocolate ice cream, and takeout from our favorite Thai place. She had texted earlier asking where I was staying, sensing I might need company. "You were magnificent," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Absolutely magnificent. The look on their faces when you laid out those photos was priceless." We stayed up until 3 in the morning, talking through everything that had happened. Taylor filled me in on what occurred after I left the restaurant. Apparently, the confrontation had continued for another 20 minutes, with Michael remaining surprisingly calm while questioning both James and Jennifer about specific dates and details. The wildest part, Taylor said, pouring more wine, was when Jennifer tried to blame James for pursuing her, and Michael immediately pulled up her text messages on his phone. Turns out he had suspected something and had been monitoring her messages through their shared cloud account. He just didn't know who she was involved with until tonight. James had eventually left the restaurant alone, humiliated and defeated. Jennifer and Michael departed separately shortly after. The restaurant had buzzed with conversation once all parties were gone, and according to Taylor, I was being hailed as some kind of folk hero among the witnesses. "Antonio told everyone your champagne was on the house next time you visit," she added with a smile. By the time Taylor left, I felt emotionally drained but strangely at peace. I slept better that night than I had in months without dreams or interruptions. The next morning, I woke to find over 30 missed calls from James and dozens of text messages ranging from apologetic to angry to pleading. I read through them, once screenshot anything that might be useful for divorce proceedings, then blocked his number. I wasn't ready to engage with him yet, and certainly not on his terms. What I didn't expect were the messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Word had spread quickly through our social circle and beyond. Friends and acquaintances were reaching out to offer support, and in some cases to share that they had suspected something but hadn't known how to tell me. A few of James's colleagues sent messages expressing their disappointment in him and assuring me they were on my side. I was touched by this outpouring of support, but also overwhelmed by the sudden attention. By Sunday afternoon, I learned through mutual friends that James had been called in for an emergency meeting with the bank's HR department and ethics committee. The bank had strict policies about supervisor-subordinate relationships, particularly undisclosed ones, that could create conflicts of interest. Jennifer had also been contacted and told not to report to work on Monday pending an investigation. James made one desperate attempt to reach me by showing up at our condo on Sunday evening. Thanks to my brother's advice, I had already changed the locks and installed a simple security camera at the front door. The footage showed James pounding on the door for nearly 10 minutes, alternating between angry demands and tearful pleas. I watched the video once feeling oddly detached, as if observing a stranger. This man was not the James I had married. On Monday morning, as promised, my attorney delivered divorce papers to James at his office, adding professional humiliation to his personal disgrace. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and included a detailed account of the affair with Jennifer as grounds for an expedited process. My attorney had advised me to move quickly while James was still reeling from the public exposure, making it more likely he would agree to generous terms rather than drag out a messy public proceeding. That same day, I received an unexpected email from Michael Williams. He thanked me for bringing the affair to light and asked if we might meet for coffee sometime that week. His email was dignified and respectful, expressing admiration for the composed way I had handled the situation. I replied that I would be happy to meet, feeling a strange kinship with this man who was experiencing the same betrayal I was. By Monday evening, social media was buzzing with vague references to what people were calling the Lago showdown. No one posted specific details online, but there were enough hints and veiled comments that anyone connected to banking or medical circles in Chicago could piece together what had happened. James's reputation was taking a very public beating while I was receiving messages of support from people I barely knew. That night alone in our condo, surrounded by photos and memories of what I had thought was a happy marriage, I allowed myself to really feel the full magnitude of what had happened. I alternated between crying jags and periods of intense anger, throwing out gifts James had given me, and removing his clothes from our closet. It wasn't pretty or dignified, but it was necessary, a private catharsis after the public performance I had maintained at the restaurant. By Tuesday morning, I felt emptied out but somehow cleaner, as if I had lanced a festering wound. The pain was still there, but it was honest pain now, not the confused suffering of suspicion and gaslighting. I could begin to heal because I finally knew exactly what I was healing from. In the weeks and months following what became known in our social circle as the Lago incident, the consequences of James and Jennifer's affair rippled outward, affecting far more than just our marriages. Their professional lives, social standing, and futures were all irreversibly altered by the choices they had made and the public manner in which those choices had been exposed. James was placed on administrative leave immediately following the incident, pending an investigation by the bank's ethics committee. 2 weeks later, I received an email from him sent from a personal account rather than his work email. He had been terminated for violation of the bank's code of conduct regarding supervisor-subordinate relationships and inappropriate use of expense accounts. He had used company funds to pay for some of their hotel meetings, disguising them as client dinners in his reports. Jennifer faced similar professional consequences, though not as severe. Being the subordinate in the relationship gave her some protection under bank policies. She was transferred to a branch in Milwaukee, effectively demoted, but still employed. According to mutual connections, she had claimed James had pursued her aggressively, and she had felt pressured by his position of authority. Whether this was true or a convenient narrative, I couldn't say for certain. Our divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. James initially tried to contest my version of events, claiming I had been cold and distant for years, driving him to seek companionship elsewhere. His attorney quickly abandoned this approach when my lawyer presented the evidence I had gathered, including the recordings of James's calls to hotel concierges making romantic arrangements. The judge was particularly unimpressed with James's attempts to hide assets by transferring money to a private account in the weeks after being exposed. This discovery, coupled with the clear evidence of his infidelity, resulted in a settlement heavily in my favor. I received our condo 60% of our joint savings and a significant portion of his retirement account. Under different circumstances, I might have felt guilty about taking so much, but given his deception, I considered it fair compensation. Throughout this process, our mutual friends largely took my side. The public nature of the exposure left little room for James to control the narrative or paint himself as the victim. Those who had witnessed the confrontation at Lago spread the story, and James found himself increasingly isolated. Invitations stopped coming. People he had considered friends suddenly became busy when he reached out. The social consequences of his actions seemed to hit him harder than the financial ones. Michael Williams filed for divorce from Jennifer within days of the Lago incident. Unlike our proceedings, theirs became contentious quickly. According to Michael, when we met for coffee the week after the exposure, Jennifer was fighting for a significant portion of his considerable assets despite their prenuptial agreement. She claims the prenup should be invalidated because I violated her privacy by checking her messages. Michael explained, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. He was calm, but there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there at the restaurant. Her attorney is arguing I created a hostile environment in the marriage by being suspicious. That's rich, I replied. Considering what she was actually doing, Michael smiled grimly. The irony isn't lost on me, or on my attorney. Our coffee meeting turned into a regular thing once every couple of weeks. There was something therapeutic about talking to someone who understood exactly what I was going through. We weren't romantic, just two people helping each other navigate the wreckage of broken marriages and broken trust. Michael was 10 years older than me, established in his career, and surprisingly philosophical about the whole situation. "I should have seen it coming," he said during our third meeting. "Jennifer always needed more attention than I could give her with my schedule. I just never thought she'd look for it with a married man." I shared similar reflections about James, wondering if I had missed signs earlier in our marriage, not just in the months before discovery. It was a delicate balance, trying to learn from the experience without blaming myself for his choices. While dealing with the divorce, I also had to rebuild my professional life. I had been working as a marketing consultant, often taking on projects through James's connections at the bank. Those connections were now gone, and I needed to establish myself independently. What I hadn't expected was how the Lago incident would actually help my career. A woman who had been dining at the restaurant that night turned out to be the CEO of a major retail chain. She reached out to me through LinkedIn with a surprising message. "Anyone who can handle a personal crisis with the dignity and strategic thinking you displayed is someone I want working on my company's marketing campaigns. Would you be interested in discussing a contract position?" That contract turned into others, and within 6 months I had established my own small marketing consultancy with 3 major clients. I specialized in crisis management and strategic communications, turning the skills I had developed during my personal ordeal into professional expertise. My social life transformed as well. The friends who stood by me during the divorce became closer than ever, while more superficial relationships fell away naturally. I joined a support group for people who had experienced infidelity, initially just seeking understanding, but eventually becoming something of a mentor to newer members. "You're the success story everyone needs to hear," the group facilitator told me after I shared my experience one evening. "You didn't just survive, you reclaimed your power." That comment stayed with me, resonating deeply with how I had come to view my journey. I hadn't just been a victim of James's betrayal, I had refused to let it define me or determine my future. Perhaps the most unexpected connection to emerge from this period was my friendship with Michael. As our respective divorces finalized, our coffee meetings continued. Michael's divorce had become very public in medical circles, with Jennifer eventually losing her battle for his assets when evidence emerged of her initiating the affair through explicit emails to James. "She apparently kept everything," Michael told me, shaking his head in disbelief. "Every message, every hotel confirmation saved in a folder in her email called J Meetings, not exactly encrypted." I laughed despite the seriousness of the situation. At least James tried to hide the evidence. Not well, but he tried. Michael smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "We certainly didn't marry master criminals." That moment of shared humor marked a turning point in our healing. We were both beginning to see our ex-spouses not as powerful figures who had destroyed our lives, but as deeply flawed individuals who had made selfish choices and lost everything that mattered as a result. 1 year after the night at Lago that changed everything, I found myself in a place I never expected to be happy, thriving and genuinely grateful for the painful journey that had brought me here. The path to healing hadn't been straight or easy, but looking back, I could see how each difficult step had been necessary for my growth. The first few months after the divorce were the hardest. Despite the satisfaction of having exposed James's betrayal, I still had to face the reality of rebuilding my life alone after 12 years of partnership. There were nights I woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore, days when ordinary tasks like grocery shopping for 1 person instead of 2 brought me to tears in the middle of the store. Trust became my biggest hurdle. Having been deceived so thoroughly by the person I trusted most, I found myself second-guessing everyone's motives and analyzing casual comments for hidden meanings. This hypervigilance was exhausting and threatened to isolate me just when I needed connection most. My therapist, Dr. Rivera, became an essential guide during this period. I had started seeing her 2 weeks after the Lago incident, recognizing I needed professional help to process everything that had happened. "Trust isn't just about other people," she told me during one particularly difficult session. "It's also about trusting yourself, your judgment, and your ability to recover if you're hurt again." This perspective shifted something fundamental for me. I had been so focused on James's betrayal that I had forgotten to acknowledge my own strength in uncovering the truth and taking decisive action. Gradually, I began to trust my instincts again, recognizing that they had actually served me well once I stopped ignoring them. As my confidence rebuilt, I focused on rediscovering parts of myself that had been neglected during my marriage. I took a pottery class I had always been curious about, joined a hiking group that explored trails around Chicago, and traveled solo to Arizona to visit the Grand Canyon. Something James had always dismissed as too touristy. Each new experience reinforced that my life was still full of possibilities. My living space transformed as well. 6 months after the divorce, I sold the condo that held too many memories and bought a smaller place in a vibrant neighborhood closer to downtown. Decorating it became a form of therapy, choosing every piece deliberately to reflect my tastes, rather than compromising with someone else's preferences. My new apartment had large windows that flooded the space with natural light walls painted in soothing blues and greens, and an entire room dedicated to my hobbies and work. It was entirely mine, a physical representation of my new independence. Professionally, my consultancy continued to grow. I hired 2 employees and moved into a small office space, specializing in helping companies navigate difficult transitions and communications challenges. The skills I had developed during my own crisis served me well in advising others through theirs. There was poetic justice in transforming my pain into professional success. My relationship with Michael evolved in unexpected ways too. What had started as mutual support during our divorces gradually shifted into a genuine friendship based on shared interests and values. We discovered we both loved classic films, hiking, and hole-in-the-wall restaurants with authentic food from around the world. About 8 months after our divorces were finalized, our friendship naturally evolved into something more. Our first official date was deliberately low-key dinner at a small Ethiopian restaurant, followed by a walk along the lakeshore. We were both cautious, aware of our recent wounds and the complexity of building something new from shared trauma. "I never expected this," Michael said as we walked the city lights reflecting off the lake. When I walked into Lago that night, I thought my life was ending, not beginning a new chapter. I understood completely. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes, if we're brave enough to keep going. We decided to take things slowly, both still healing and learning to trust again. But there was comfort in being with someone who truly understood the journey I had been through, who never minimized the pain or suggested I should just get over it. James made one last attempt to reconnect about 10 months after our divorce. He emailed saying he had been in therapy, recognized his mistakes, and wanted to apologize properly. After discussing it with Dr. Rivera, I agreed to meet him for coffee in a public place. The man who sat across from me looked older and humbled. He had lost weight and the confident swagger that had once characterized him. He apologized sincerely for the pain he had caused, explaining but not excusing his behavior. He had been promoted quickly, let the power go to his head, and convinced himself he deserved more than the life we had built together. "I destroyed the best thing in my life," he said simply. "I'll regret that until the day I die." I found, somewhat to my surprise, that I could listen to him without anger. The rage that had fueled me through the investigation and exposure had burnt itself out, leaving behind a cool clarity. "I forgive you, James," I said finally. "Not for you, but for me. I don't want to carry this anger anymore." His eyes filled with tears. Is there any chance we could—" I shook my head firmly. "No, that chapter is closed permanently. But I hope you find happiness eventually. Just be honest next time." We parted ways amicably, and I walked away feeling a final weight lift from my shoulders. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or reconciling. It meant freedom from the emotional chains that had bound me to him and our shared past. As for Jennifer, I heard through mutual connections that she had eventually left the bank entirely and moved back to her hometown in Minnesota. According to Michael, who had finalized all legal matters with her, she had also entered therapy and acknowledged her role in the affair. Sometimes I wondered if she and James ever contacted each other after everything fell apart, but it ultimately didn't matter to me anymore. Their choices had shaped my path, but no longer controlled my future. Now, a year after exposure and approaching the final pieces of my healing journey, I could look back and recognize how much I had grown. The woman who had methodically investigated her husband's affair and orchestrated its public exposure was stronger than I had known I could be. The woman who rebuilt her life afterward was wiser and more authentically herself than she had ever been in marriage. Life after betrayal wasn't about finding someone new or achieving professional success, though both had happened for me. It was about reclaiming my sense of self-worth, trusting my instincts, and building a life aligned with my true values, rather than compromising to maintain a relationship built on lies. If you're going through something similar, please know that the pain does eventually subside. Trust yourself, surround yourself with supportive people, and be patient with your healing process. The path forward isn't about forgetting what happened, but about integrating it into your story without letting it define you. Have you ever had to rebuild after a betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the most healing thing is knowing we're not alone in our experiences. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and transformation. And remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story.